Hello and welcome to Dear Cons, the coffee break podcast where we tackle your biggest corporate cons challenges. I'm Imogen.
And I'm Amanda. We're here to give you practical, no-nonsense advice so you can focus on the things that really drive influence, engagement and impact.
Well, welcome back to our series on crisis management. Last time we talked to you a little bit about that preparation stage. So building the right culture in your organization, assessing risk, and getting your crisis team in place. We're now going to move on to the eye of the storm. Stakes are high, time is short, pressure is on, and you're in a crisis.
But are you? Firstly, I think it's useful to explore the basics. Is it a crisis or is it merely an issue?
That's right. I mean, no matter what it feels like at the time, and it always feels worse than it probably is, but not everything that goes wrong in the business is a crisis. Some things are just issues. And telling the difference between the two, so knowing whether it's an issue or whether it's a crisis, really matters because it has a real impact on the approach that you take.
Yeah, 100%. An issue is generally something you can manage internally with time, context, and calm. An issue is when the majority of your commercial operations can continue as normal. Thankfully, there's been no injury, illness, or worse. An issue generally stays internal. It's unlikely to make it into the public domain. So we're talking, quality issues, something that's gone wrong in your supply chain. You're assessing the impact and things you can do to mitigate that issue. It could be internal policies. You might have introduced a new working from home policy and everybody's up in arms about it. Or it could be a piece of changing legislation that the business is needing to prepare for. I do caveat that any of these issues could become crisis, of course. At the end of the day, if you have any potential element of public concern, then you're edging that way.
A crisis is a new sense of urgency. It's very high stakes. And as you say, it's usually public. It's usually external. When we're looking at, is it a crisis? Is it an issue? There are a couple of filters that you can use. So, is it time sensitive? Does it require an immediate response? Does it threaten trust in the organization or the people? So has it caused your business to stop or be significantly impacted? And thirdly, is it publicly visible? Is it likely to cause concern externally with key stakeholders, your customers, society as a whole? If it's just one or two out of those three, it might still sit in that issue box. But as you say, if things are mishandled, it can escalate quickly. If the answer is yes to all three, so time sensitive, trust threatening, publicly visible, then you are in a crisis.
Can't stress enough the importance of issues monitoring to really stop those slow burns turning into that crisis or a wildfire. If it's on your radar early enough, you can often avoid activating a crisis team altogether.
Yeah, you can put in place a matrix. You know how much I like a matrix to assess the situation. But a matrix can help your teams understand what the level of priority might be and therefore their next steps. So if you map out the different areas of concern, so it could be people, business impact, consumer impact, etc., and then the different things that might happen at different levels of issue or crisis.
Yeah, so for example, if we look at consumer impact, if there is none, it's probably just an issue. If there's a short-term impact, you've probably got a level 1 crisis. And if it's long-term impact with threat to the business and your license to operate, then it's going to escalate up pretty quickly.
Yeah, so develop a matrix, depending on your business, depending on your consumers, depending on your employees, and give it to your team so that they can then use it to understand how to escalate. Can this incident be managed locally, for example? Or is it something that your crisis management team needs to get involved with? But let's say, Amanda, we're in a crisis, we know it. What do we do now?
Yeah, in the first hour, you've got a couple of key tasks. I think first you need to mobilize people to get the facts together. There's always a lot of uncertainty at the beginning of a crisis situation.
Yeah, you won't be able to find out everything immediately. But in that first hour, I reckon you've got to know, what's happened, when, where, who, and what's being done to resolve it.
Yeah, and if there are any gaps in information, you need to know about it and fill them as quickly as possible. I think next up, activate your crisis management team. Mm-hmm. It's certainly the core of your team. It might not be the extended team.
So that core, if you remember when we spoke about it last time, was your leader. So that'd be a CEO or senior management. That would be your comms person. And that would be that kind of chief of staff role who organizes that management team. That would be your core, do you think?
Absolutely. And getting those three people together rather than waiting for the extended team will make a difference, because you can already start thinking about what your next steps are. And I would advise that that's within 60 to 90 minutes of somebody within the business identifying a crisis. And of course, it's important that your crisis management team is fully aware of its roles and responsibilities before the crisis happens.
Yeah, because titles don't always reflect the responsibility they'll have, right?
Absolutely. I worked with a client, gas and oil client in Kazakhstan, and the leader was an expat, and it was just not the right person to be the face-off or leader in that country. It just politically wasn't appropriate. It had to be a local national. So you need clarity in practice.
I mean, as well as understanding what everyone's doing, what roles and responsibilities we have, I think it's also really important to know who's making decisions. And this goes back to the conversation we had with Nell about decision making. Because if it's not clear who has the final say, you're going to have a decision paralysis. We've seen it over and over. There are a lot of smart people in a room under a lot of pressure, but there's no one actually taking the lead on making a decision. So they're just going round and round in circles.
Yeah, a crisis team is not a committee and doing things by committee. You need a pre-built decision tree, or at the very least an escalation framework. It saves hours. Everybody knows what they're authorised to do, who to involve, and when to move.
So you've got your team in place, you know who's doing what. You probably, within that first hour, also need to pull together some form of a holding statement, because the awful thing is the media is often going to be in touch before you know all the facts yourself. So you need to have something to tell them which acknowledges what you do know, but doesn't speculate any further.
Yeah, it's a great idea to have some drafts on the shelf, so you're not starting from scratch. The risks in your business. You can probably put together some templates that you can then use and build on. And it's also a good idea to brief your switchboard, reception, security, and let them know how to handle any media or members of the public if they call or arrive on site. And it happens.
It does. We've seen it happen. Okay, so we're now into that second hour of crisis. You will need to hold the first meeting of your crisis management team, and we'd really recommend you create a log of any actions and decisions made.
Absolutely. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but my advice is that log is created and held by your legal team. It means in certain countries, parts of the document may be deemed confidential and legally privileged. So top tip, talk to your legal team and see what you need to do to protect yourself and the business with that log.
That log's really also important to remind people of what's been discussed, what things we said we would do, when we said we would do them by. And it just really keeps you on track as you manage that crisis moving forward.
Yeah, and it also helps in terms of the review and learn at the end why we made that decision. And could we improve the way we did things in the future?
You may also want to think about your social media and planned marketing activities.
Yeah, and, of course, when we say the media could come calling, you have to include social media, in that these days in terms of where comments are being made and where things are escalating very quickly. So we're into the second day. Hopefully
That went
it
quick.
did, didn't it? Well, it does. That's the whole point, I think. We're into the second day. You should be well into the rhythm of meetings and actions. And this is the point really where you should now have a full set of communications, messaging, internal and external. We'll cover this in more detail in our next episode, but you also should have the full gambit of media, social media, coverage tracking on high alert. You know, what questions or concerns are being raised? Are you responding in the right way, if you're responding? And what's brewing?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is most overlooked when you're in that kind of frenetic activity of the first couple of days and everything's going on is that we forget our ongoing evaluation and review that we need to do, as with any communications.
It's the sanity check. Often mid-crisis, there's a temptation to keep spinning the wheel, doing what you're doing. But you should take time to review where you are. What do we know? What needs checking? What's changed? What assumptions are we making? At this stage, really avoids that panic pivot. Stops you reacting to rumours instead of facts.
When we're looking at a crisis and when we're dealing with a crisis, this shouldn't be the first time that you've gone through your crisis protocol. Once the crisis happens, you need to be moving into a plan that you trust, moving into something that you've done before. We shouldn't have to improvise under pressure. So have your crisis plan in place, rehearse it, make sure your team, your crisis management team have it down pat. The best crisis responses aren't reactive and left to chance. They're planned and they're practiced.
Almost boring, to be honest, because you've been through it before and everybody knows what they're doing. I would say to all our comms people out there, you're not just there to write the statement. You're an early warning system, a sense checker, and you're also the story shaper. Make sure that you help the business see risk coming and help them respond with clarity.
And as a closing thought, I think remember that you are not on your own, or at least you shouldn't be. Crisis response is a team sport. You have strategy, operations, legal, HR. You're all working towards the same objective. You're all working towards the same end. And you need these experts alongside you. And they need you, frankly, if you're going to be successful. If this episode sparked a question or if you have a crisis story to share, we love a good crisis story, do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, and remember, we can't touch everything in an episode. So if you need any insight and advice, do drop us a note. And don't miss episode 3, where we're digging into how we communicate under pressure, what to say, how to say it, how to avoid sounding like a corporate robot when everything around you is on fire.
So thanks for your time and we'll speak to you soon.
Bye.